So, here we are in early 2026, and the world isn't just facing one crisis. It feels like we're facing this massive convergence of threats, and they're so interconnected, it can be really hard to see the bigger picture. So today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to connect the dots and explain how we got to this exact moment, a world that's truly on the edge.
Here's how we're going to break it all down for you. We've got 5 parts. We'll kick things off with a single, really shocking event, and then we'll zoom out to see how alliances are fraying, the global rulebook is basically being torn up, and flashpoints are igniting all over the place. And then we'll pull it all together to define what this new age of disorder really looks like.
All right, let's dive right in. The whole thing really starts in January 2026 with a statement from one of America's closest allies. And it's a statement that, honestly, just a few years ago would have been completely and totally unthinkable.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. The Prime Minister of Denmark, a founding member of NATO, is on the record contemplating a military attack from the United States, the leader of that very same alliance. This isn't a rival or some adversary saying this. This is a friend, and it signals a rupture in the Western alliance that is, frankly, historic.
So you have to ask yourself, how on earth did it come to this? How could two allies who've been bound by a defense treaty for over 75 years get to the actual brink of a confrontation? Well, the answer lies on a massive, ice-covered island in the North Atlantic. And man, this thing escalated with breathtaking speed. Now, the idea of the U.S. buying Greenland, that wasn't totally new. But in early 2026, it suddenly became a very real threat. President Trump brought it up again, refused to rule out using force, and then dropped this chilling 20-day deadline. In Denmark, this was seen for what it was, an ultimatum, and it forced the Prime Minister to issue that stark warning.
So, why the intense focus on Greenland? Well, if you're sitting in Washington, this is all about hard-nosed geopolitics. The Arctic is opening up, creating these new shipping lanes that are absolutely vital to global trade and security. Plus, Greenland is a treasure trove of rare earth minerals. We're talking about the building blocks of all modern tech, from your phone to missile guidance systems. And that's a market that China overwhelmingly dominates right now. The U.S. administration's argument is basically that Denmark just isn't up to the task of defending this critical territory from Russia and China. And what makes this whole situation even messier is that the U.S. already has a major military presence there. Pitovik Space Base isn't just some outpost. It's one of America's most critical strategic assets. It's the northernmost U.S. military installation, and it's a key part of the early warning system that protects North America from missile attacks. So this isn't just about getting new territory, it's about securing an asset the Pentagon sees is absolutely indispensable.
You know, the threat against Greenland didn't just challenge international law. It struck right at the heart of the U.S.-Denmark relationship. To really get the sense of betrayal that was felt in Copenhagen, you have to understand the history of this alliance, which has literally been forged in blood.
Just look back at Denmark's track record as an ally. Think about the Iraq War in 2003. That was a deeply divisive time for NATO. You had major powers like France and Germany refusing to get involved, but Denmark stood with the United States, sending its soldiers to fight alongside American troops for 4 straight years.
And in Afghanistan, wow, the commitment was even costlier. 43. That's the number of Danish soldiers who were killed serving in Helmand province, one of the most violent corners of that entire war. On a per capita basis, Denmark actually suffered some of the highest casualty rates of any country in the coalition, even more than the United States. They went where the fighting was the absolute toughest.
And that's the context for the shock and the anger in Denmark. After all that shared sacrifice, to have their contribution to Arctic security publicly mocked. Well, the contrast between those 43 fallen soldiers and the dismissive "one more dog sled" comment just perfectly illustrates the profound disconnect here. To them, it felt like a total betrayal of decades of loyalty.
Okay, so this crisis over Greenland, as wild as it is, isn't happening in a vacuum. It's really a dramatic symptom of a much, much larger global trend. The foundational rules and institutions that have pretty much kept the peace since World War II are crumbling.
For decades, a key pillar of that stability was arms control. And at the very top of that whole structure was the New START Treaty. It was this painstakingly negotiated agreement that put a cap on the number of nuclear warheads the U.S. and Russia could deploy, and, just as important, it let each side inspect the other to make sure everyone was playing by the rules.
And that's the deadline we're staring down. In just a few weeks, that treaty is gone. The administration hasn't shown much interest in extending it, saying they can do a better agreement later on. But with zero negotiations happening, the world is just heading straight for a cliff.
For the first time in over 50 years, there will be absolutely no limits on the world's two largest nuclear arsenals. As Jeff Wilson from the Stimson Center warns, this just opens the door to a completely unconstrained and deeply unpredictable new nuclear arms race.
So, as that Western-led order starts to weaken, new groups are rising up to challenge it. The big one you hear about is the BRICS Plus group. It started as Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, but it's expanded to include major powers like Saudi Arabia and Iran. It's created this powerful bloc that represents the interests of the global South. And this isn't just a political statement. This chart shows the huge economic shift that's already happened. The combined GDP of the BRICS Plus nations now officially surpasses that of the G7, the club of the big Western industrial economies. Economic power is shifting, and geopolitical influence is shifting right along with it.
Another major front in this global competition is the battle over technology. The US-China chip war has just been a roller coaster of bans and truces. Right now, there's a fragile agreement that allows the sale of slightly older generation AI chips to China, and the demand is just staggering, which shows you how absolutely critical this technology is to the future of, well, everything.
This breakdown of the old order, it's not just some academic theory. It's creating real-world instability, and it's igniting flashpoints all across the globe. Let's take a quick look at some of the most critical hotspots right now.
Pretty much every security analyst you talk to agrees that the single most dangerous place on Earth right now is the Taiwan Strait. A conflict there wouldn't just be some regional skirmish. It would be a global catastrophe, pitting the world's great powers directly against each other.
Back in 2025, China's military ran these massive exercises that were, for all intents and purposes, a dress rehearsal for a full blockade of Taiwan. And that is a huge deal. It suggests a strategy to basically strangle the island into submission without a bloody invasion. The fear in Taipei and Washington is that this blockade capability could be switched on with very little warning, presenting the world with a terrible, terrible choice.
Shifting our focus to the Middle East, the entire region is caught in this awful state of no war, no peace. You've got a series of fragile ceasefires that have paused the major fighting, but none of the underlying problems have been solved. The whole region is basically a powder keg, just waiting for a spark.
And the really crucial point here is how interconnected all these crises are. A humanitarian collapse in Gaza, a potential civil war in Lebanon as UN peacekeepers pull out, violent protests in Iran. It's all happening at once. And meanwhile, those Houthi attacks in the Red Sea could start up again at any moment. A spark in any one of these places could set the entire region on fire.
And all this is happening while the war in Ukraine grinds on, and Russia continues to test NATO's resolve all along its eastern border. They're using these hybrid actions, everything from submarine patrols to false flag incidents, all designed to destabilize the very same alliance that's now being fractured over Greenland.
And honestly, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Beyond these major flashpoints, you've got brutal civil wars across Africa, rising instability in Latin America, and constant tensions in Asia. The bottom line is that the world's attention and resources are being stretched dangerously thin. The fires are burning everywhere.
So, how do we make sense of all this? In our final section, we're going to connect these threads, everything from a dispute over Greenland to wars in Africa, and argue that they are all part of one single, overarching phenomenon. This right here, this is the key takeaway from our whole explainer. What we're witnessing in early 2026 isn't just a bad year. It's a fundamental shift in the international system. The Greenland crisis, the Taiwan blockade drills, the collapse of arms control, they're all symptoms of a world that is becoming fundamentally more chaotic and a whole lot more dangerous.
This is the new reality. Alliances like NATO, which we once thought were unshakable, are showing deep fractures. The guardrails of arms control are just disappearing. The economic and political center of gravity is shifting away from the West. Local wars have the potential to go global with terrifying speed. And all of this is happening while these invisible threats, from cyber attacks to disinformation, are getting more powerful every single day.
And that leaves us with one final and honestly pretty sobering question. For about 3 generations, the world operated under a set of rules, however imperfectly they were applied. That era really seems to be over. As we step into this new age of disorder, the most important and uncertain question of all is this. In a world without rules, who gets to write the new ones?